Okay, welcome back for another episode of Bitcoin School. So today, a very broad topic, and will be later broken down into smaller videos. But what is Bitcoin? What is the sort of bird's eye view of Bitcoin? So in this video today, we'll be covering things like how Bitcoin allows us to not trust third parties like banks and Visa and other credit card companies, solving the double spend problem, truly decentralized public monetary ledger, which is very short sort of definition of Bitcoin. We'll explain that a little bit more. Actually being able to have true ownership of something digital, which was until Bitcoin impossible, and how Bitcoin is just like the internet and just like email, it is just a protocol. Okay, so if you want to stick around for that and to learn what Bitcoin is, then roll the intro.
In the Bitcoin school, we learned to trade digital coins, man, we getting paid. Crypto world, it ain't no charade. Navigating blocks like a digital arcade. Peer-to-peer is how we roll. Code it up, we in control. Crypto wallet makes us whole. Stacked in Satoshis, that's the goal. Bitcoin school, we staying cool.
Okay, so short little history of Bitcoin before we get into what it is. A lot of people falsely assume that Bitcoin was the first ever digital currency, and it was, the first ever one, and then it was successful. But really, it started way back. Let me drag this out of the way. Yeah, over here. You can see it started all the way back in 1975 with the first cryptography had to be invented first, right? And then time stamping, which Bitcoin is really a time chain, so stamping time into a blockchain. And then other people like David Chaum here invented a digital cash, like super early. Was this like 1984-ish? And then the proof of work, which is the protocol, part of the protocol that Bitcoin uses is proof of work. That was developed way back in 1992. And then you had these things like Cybercash, eGold. The NSA wrote a paper about how to make a mint, like a digital mint of currency. And then Wei Dai here, how he invented B money, and he was referenced in the Bitcoin white paper from Satoshi Nakamoto. Hal Finney, Adam Beck, these are famous Bitcoiners that were also involved in the early communications with Satoshi Nakamoto. And then 2009, we get the release of Bitcoin. So really, Bitcoin had a long history before 2009. It was, 30, 40 years of work to get to Bitcoin. So that's just an important thing to understand, is that Bitcoin was the end of a long process of trial and error, not the beginning of something. So as I mentioned, how Bitcoin is just a protocol, just like HTTP, web browser protocol is just a protocol. Being able to send a voice over the internet is just a protocol. Being able to send email, SMTP, is just a protocol. And Bitcoin is, well, I don't want to say just a protocol, very important protocol, but we finally have a protocol for money. So Strike CEO Jack Mallers explains this really well.
What if that user in Japan wanted to tip you for this amazing show and your amazing tweets, and you had your Venmo account linked? Out of luck. And so what the internet did for communication is, before, if you wanted to send a message to someone in Japan a long time ago, you would write it on a thinly sliced piece of wood, and you'd send a fucking pigeon to go fly it across and hope that they delivered, the pigeon spits your note out to whoever you want to read it. And you're like, hey, what are you doing for dinner? And a pigeon spit is all over the message that you tried to send. Now you can send a tweet. What the internet did to communication is it gave the world a singular global protocol. So whether you want to ask a friend what they're doing for dinner, whether you want to Google the best restaurant in town, whether you want to buy tickets to the Bear game, all of those communication efforts are all just an internet request, an HTTPS, TCP/IP request. The internet is one singular protocol for communication. So now you can use that protocol to send a message, again, to a user in Japan, to a user in Saudi Arabia,
So we have all these different apps, that are built on the internet, WhatsApp and different Signal and Telegram and different messaging apps. But the app is just a user interface, right? But behind the app is a protocol, and the protocol is the internet, and then the internet can be broken into, HTTPS protocol for websites, and VoIP for voice over internet protocol, and the SMTP for email. So protocols built on top of protocols, and now we add one more, which is the Bitcoin protocol.
To user in South Africa. It all works globally. Now let's revisit money today. Today, money is still in pigeon land. Money is still in riding a horse carriage to deliver newspaper land, where if you're in the US, you've got Cash App and Venmo. Western Union is for remittance. But if you go to Starbucks, do you use Western Union? No, you use your Visa card. But if you're online and you buy some merchandise, you use Stripe. They're independent, bifurcated, closed networks to accomplish monetary settlement. What Bitcoin and the Lightning Network does is it gives the world a global singular protocol.
So all these different, like Stripe and Venmo in the US and Cash App and PayPal and all these different ways of sending people money in the modern day, they're not sharing a protocol. PayPal's code is different to Stripe's code, and Stripe's code is different to Cash App's code, for example, right? They don't share some underlying protocol. They're all just keeping track of their own ledger, their own monetary ledger, who paid who, and who owes who what, and who's sending this to who. But okay, so we'll let Jack finish here.
Call for monetary settlement in the same way that the internet is a global singular protocol for communications. Okay. And so now all of a sudden, if your Venmo account is linked to your Twitter account, can someone from Japan tip you a penny? No. But if you're hooked into the singular global interoperable monetary protocol for the world, can they tip you a penny over the Lightning and Bitcoin network? Yes. And there are so many precursors that people don't appreciate. In order to have that, you'd have to have a money that works everywhere in the world, that lives outside of a governance by a nation state, that lives outside of an issuance from a nation state, from a company. So Bitcoin, as the only digital bearer instrument on the planet, is a precursor to this experience. And then on top of that, you need a protocol that can allow it to achieve instant physical bearer instrument settlement and free physical bearer instrument settlement. And that's the Lightning Network. And combined,
so he's calling Bitcoin there a physical digital bearer instrument. So having something physical and digital is a bit of a oxymoron almost, but it's the reason why he's calling it a bearer instrument, because a bearer instrument meaning whoever has it, whoever's in possession of it, is the owner. For example, when you have money in the bank, the money you gave the bank your money, the bank now owns your money, and they owe you. So the money you see in your bank account is an IOU. So when you go to get that money, you're requesting it back from them. You're saying, hey, I see I have $10,000 in my account. I would like some of that, please, to send to whoever, John in the US. I want to send some money to John. You're asking permission from the bank. The bank can say yes or no because they have the money. You gave it to them, and they might decide to not give it back to you, or they might decide to delay it, or they might decide to charge you a huge fee. But with Bitcoin, if you have Bitcoin in your wallet, that is yours. The wallet doesn't own it. The wallet software doesn't own it. There's no one holding it for you, promising to give it back. It's yours. You can do with it what you like. So, okay, so to summarize a little bit about what Jack was saying, and just from what we've learned already, is Bitcoin is a decentralized peer-to-peer network. So if you hold Bitcoin in your wallet, any wallet software, right? Anyone can make a wallet software and build it on top of Bitcoin. So a Bitcoin wallet is not the Bitcoin protocol. That's a wallet software built on top of the Bitcoin protocol, right? So you have some wallet software, any of hundreds and if not thousands of different wallet softwares you can choose from, and you want to send your Bitcoin to yourself, to another wallet, or to someone else, no one can stop you. It's a peer-to-peer network. There's no permission. There's no manager in a bank checking, oh, that's over the $100,000 limit. We have to, clear that and check that. There's none of that. If you want to send it from A to B and you're using the Bitcoin protocol, nothing that can stop you. So there's a hard cap of 21 million Bitcoin coins in circulation, and that's what kind of gives Bitcoin its value, is it has this scarcity, right? So there's no scarcity to fiat currencies. They print as much euros and dollars and things, Canadian dollars, Australian dollars, New Zealand dollars. There's no limit on the number of dollars that can exist, but there's a limit of Bitcoin, and it's 21 million. So it's actually broken down into, there's 17.6%, they say lost Bitcoin. Lost Bitcoin meaning they're not lost, you can see them on the blockchain, but they are assumed lost when they haven't moved for over, I think it's over 6 or 7 years, maybe it's 10 years. When they haven't moved, they're assumed lost. Because a lot of people, especially in the early days when Bitcoins were worth cents and, in the single digit dollar value, a lot of people were careless with their wallet security and lost passwords to wallets or lost private keys and can't get back into them. So the Bitcoins technically are not lost. Like I said, you can see them on the blockchain. Like, there's no such thing as a lost Bitcoin, but a lost access to, I guess, is a better way to put it. So lost access, almost 20%. So it's like, what is that? It's like 5-6 million Bitcoin out of circulation. So the real circulation is closer to sort of 15-16 million. Okay, then you have the Satoshi wallet, which there's a million coins in the Satoshi Nakamoto wallet. So in a future video, we're going into who is Satoshi or what is Satoshi. But those are coins that have also never moved, because it's widely believed Satoshi is likely a group of people, and it seems like they have burned access to that wallet. And so these are also technically lost coins that will never move, because they've gone from a value of, of nothing, a million Bitcoins in the early, Bitcoin had a beginning value of 0. So a million Bitcoins when Satoshi mined them was worth 0 or close to 0, very, very low number. And now it's multiple billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. So the fact they haven't moved kind of goes to show that they probably never will. And then the rest of the spread of the 21 million. So, and the majority is held by individual Bitcoin, is almost 60%. And that actually, last time I checked, that's growing. So another quick little summary. This is a good explanation from The Guardian. This actually came out years ago. This was like 2017, I think, 2016, 17, 18, this video came out. So it's a few years old, but they did a really good job of kind of summarizing Bitcoin in a couple of minutes. So I'll play it.
Bitcoin is a digital currency which aims to do away with all the problems we have paying for things online. You may think that the system we have is pretty good, but everything we buy today has to go through a bank or credit card company who take a cut of the transaction and who rely on our trust that they'll do everything right. After a while, those payments start to build up, and added to that is security. You have to trust your card company to keep your details safe. Many people have tried to work out how to have a payment system without that middleman. But then there's another problem. How do you prove that you've paid for something? Or even that you have that money at all, without someone vouching for you? It's so serious it has a name, the double spending problem. Then, in 2008, a solution was offered by an anonymous programmer going by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Nakamoto left a paper on a popular cryptography blog which proposed a system of currency that solved all of these fiddly problems. His proposal was that instead of a bank or credit card company recording every transaction in one central ledger, all of the users would record all of the transactions at the same time. As a result, any attempt to...
So, a protocol. Bitcoin is a protocol for a public monetary ledger. I want to keep sort of hammering that home. It's public, so anyone can have a copy and run a node, and that helps. That also speaks to its decentralization. It's very cost effective as long as you have an internet connection and an old computer, or even you can run it on, the computer that you are using day to day. Internet connection and a computer, you can run a Bitcoin node. And most people will use Bitcoin without knowing it. And that's already happening with companies like Jack Mallers, the guy before, explaining Bitcoin's property as a protocol. he has a company called Strike, and Strike obviously uses Bitcoin as its protocol beneath its product, and its product is the Strike app. And on the Strike app, you can buy, sell Bitcoin and transfer Bitcoin, and also fiat currency. You can send $1 to another Strike user from the US to Mexico or to Canada, or wherever, anywhere in the world. And you can just use his app to send fiat currency if you like. So you don't even need to buy Bitcoin. But the way the app sends the fiat currency is the app behind the scenes transfers it to Bitcoin and uses the Bitcoin network to send the money. But the user just sees that there is fiat moving. The user has no idea that actually below in the code of the app is actually using the Bitcoin network. And that's how most people will use Bitcoin, just like how you use email without thinking about the STMP protocol, and you use a browser without thinking about the HTTPS protocol. You'll get to know the products, and you'll get to understand how the products work, but you won't even think about the Bitcoin protocol. Most people won't think about the Bitcoin protocol in the very near future, because it will just be the thing running beneath everything. Just like you don't think about when you're sitting in your house, about all the electrical wires and the plumbing that is running through the floor and the ceilings and the walls. You're more, concerned and more familiar with the bed you're sleeping on and the couch you're sitting on and the TV you're watching, because those things you're, touching and interacting with and seeing and feeling. But it's the plumbing and the electrical cables and the stuff you can't see and the walls and the ceiling that allows all those things to work. And that's how Bitcoin is, and that's how most people will experience it, is they won't even think about it. Okay, so this is a clip. Roger Ver, he's a famous Bitcoiner. I won't go into his history too much. He kind of got a bit crazy, and he released his own version of Bitcoin that didn't end up being that successful, but he was still a great Bitcoin mind, and he had a good, especially early in his Bitcoin days, he had some very good things to say about Bitcoin, and he can articulate Bitcoin very well. So I just want to play this little clip from him.
Before Bitcoin, all these companies like PayPal and Visa and Bank of America and any business, they had a ledger that kept track of all their account balances. So PayPal has a ledger that keeps track of exactly who has how much money in each PayPal account, and that ledger is stored on PayPal servers in PayPal's data center somewhere. And before the invention of Bitcoin, people thought that it was impossible. All the mathematicians and computer scientists thought that it was impossible to have consensus on a distributed ledger like this. But what Bitcoin did is it came along and figured out how to keep track of this ledger that keeps track of who has what Bitcoins. But instead of that ledger being on one data center, it's on everybody's computer across the entire planet that's running the Bitcoin network, including my laptop right here. I have a full copy of the entire Bitcoin ledger.
Okay, so to sum up a little bit about what Roger Ver was saying, so Bitcoin is unique and is revolutionary because you can send something online without retaining a copy. Throughout the whole of the internet's history, if you send an email, you retain a copy. You're actually sending a copy. If you send someone a PDF or download a PDF, you're downloading a copy. If you save an image from Google Images, you're saving a copy. You don't have the original image. So Bitcoin's actually the first digital thing that you can send to someone, and they actually get it and you lose it. Like, you don't retain a copy of it. So it's this digital thing, but it has physical properties. Just like if I give you my gold coin, if I physically give you my gold coin, now by definition, I don't have the gold coin, you have the gold coin. And that's how Bitcoin works, but in a digital world on the internet. And like I said before, it's a bearer asset. So whoever holds it owns it. There's no IOUs, which is what your bank account is. If you have $10,000 in your bank, it's just the bank promising you to give you $10,000. It's an IOU. But Bitcoin is not an IOU. Bitcoin is a bearer asset. If you have it in your wallet, it is yours. It is undeniably, cryptographically, provably yours.
A former VP at JP Morgan He now spends his time studying and educating audiences about Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is generally difficult to explain. You want to try and break it down as simple as you can. So the simplest way is basically, it's like a message. It's a digital message that you're passing. And normally we're all used to computers. We're all sending emails, we're all sending pictures, but you're always sending a copy. Anytime you hit the send button in a computer, you always retain a copy, you always retain the original. And when it comes to financial transactions, you hit the send button and you have an intermediary, the bank, that is moving money from one account to another. And this is the problem that Bitcoin solved. It was able to take something digital, and when you hit the send button, you're not actually sending a copy, you're actually sending a digital object.
Okay, so I think you just explained it better than me. But yeah, it's the hard thing to wrap your head around, and it's still hard to comprehend it as like you're digitally sending a physical object. Well, it's physical in a digital sense, so it's a tough one, and it takes a while to get your head around. But that is the innovation of Bitcoin, is that sending something digitally without retaining a copy, which gives it, I guess you could say, it gives it the properties of a physical thing. It's still, you can't call it a physical thing because it's not, right? It's on the internet, it's just ones and zeros, it's computer code, but it now has a property of a physical object. So Bitcoin is both, it's a payment network and a currency, right? So that's the first time that we have had something that is payment network and a currency at the same time. And there's a video I'll play in a second that explains it really well. It's the first one ever. This is the breakthrough of Bitcoin. This is what makes Bitcoin special. And this is what allows Bitcoin to cut out the middlemen, right? So there's no Visa company coming in and taking 3% of every transaction that you make as a business, right? Because Bitcoin doesn't need that, because it's both a payment network and a currency at the exact same time. So here's a video that explains it really well.
I think part of the confusion is that Bitcoin is actually two different things. It's both a currency and a payment network. And we've never had one thing that's both of those at the same time. So the dollar is a currency, but it's not a payment network. PayPal and Visa are payment networks, but they're not currencies. Bitcoin is both of those things at the same time, but it has this other property, and that other property is that it can instantly be teleported anywhere in the world, just like that, almost for free. And there's nothing that anybody can do to block these teleportations. There's nothing anybody can do to intercept these teleportations. And if you're careful about how you use Bitcoin, you can do these teleportations anonymously. So with Bitcoin, with a push of a button, you can pay anyone anywhere in the world or receive payment from anyone anywhere in the world.
So there's no frozen funds, because there's no middleman, there's no one in between you and your transaction. No one can stop it. So if you look during COVID and whatever you feel about that whole debacle of 2020 to 23 or late 22, is you might have heard about the Canadian truckers story, and anyone in Canada that donated to the Canadian truckers who were protesting the COVID fucking madness, is there was people that donated 50 Canadian dollars from their bank account to the Canadian truckers, even from their bank account or from their PayPal, and they had their accounts frozen. It's not possible with Bitcoin. The Canadian truckers also got Bitcoin donations, and those were the only donations they actually kept, because there was no way for governments to take those back or to block them or to seize them. It's just not technically possible. They would have loved to, but it's just not possible in the protocol. The protocol doesn't allow it. You can't get in the middle of a Bitcoin transaction. And there was a famous Canadian company called Nunchuck, and they have a Bitcoin wallet, and they got a letter from the Canadian government. Maybe I'll find it and I'll throw it up in the video now. So it should be on screen. And they famously told the Canadian government, like, fuck you. And we're a wallet provider, we're a software provider, we don't have any details about, our customers. And actually, like, you guys are idiots because you obviously don't understand Bitcoin. We couldn't block the transactions if we wanted to, if we tried. If you gave us all the money in the world, we still couldn't block it. So you read the letter yourself. But it's funny. They were trolling the fucking retarded government. Okay, so no asking permission to send large sums of money. But the Bitcoin network doesn't care if you want to send someone $5 or $5 billion. You'll pay at whatever point in time you decide to, and this will be another video about Bitcoin transactions and about fees, but you pay fees to send Bitcoin transactions. They're very small in comparison to, Visa card fees or international money transfer fees. Like, when you compare the fees to traditional banking and they're essentially free, but they're not technically free. You have to you pay little tiny fractions of Bitcoin to send Bitcoin transactions, but there's no difference in fee. If I want to send $500 or $5 billion, the fee's going to be the same. No holding periods, no waiting, and there's no requirement to join. Right? You don't have to fill out a form. You don't have to take a photo of your ID. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to ask anyone's permission. Bitcoin is a permissionless protocol.
Bitcoin is internet money. It's a system of money that exists on the internet, was created on the internet, and it allows you to send and receive value the same way you can send and receive an email anywhere in the world, instantaneously, without intermediaries. And that's kind of what you see at first glance. Behind that, it's a whole platform. It is, as the title of the book says, the Internet of Money. It is a set of protocols that allow you to basically exchange value with other people. But you can do a lot more with it than just that. Most people will use it as a currency. It's basically money that you can transmit from your smartphone to somebody else's smartphone directly, just like cash, but electronic. And the thing about it that's unique is that it's not owned by any corporation, any bank, or any government. Just like the web isn't owned by anyone, or email isn't owned by anyone. And there's lots of companies that can send and receive email. There's lots of companies that can set up websites. There's a lot of companies that can set up applications that use Bitcoin. It's really quite interesting what happens when you create a form of money that is truly global. We really don't have forms of money that are truly global. If you even with your very advanced banking system and your access to all of the technology that you have in the American banking system, if you try to send money to some countries, it's almost impossible to do. And I experience this every time I get paid in Bitcoin. I'll go into a conference in Europe, and I'll do one conference with a banking industry and one conference with the Bitcoin community. And the little Bitcoin conference is going to be free to attend. And I don't make any money, but they sometimes cover some of my expenses. And I'll send an invoice. And the banking industry conference will send me a wire transfer. It takes, on average, 4 weeks for me to get it, with several calls to find out where it went, what's going on, why did it get lost. And it takes me on average 15 minutes to get paid in Bitcoin, no matter which country I'm being paid in.
This is a cynic in me. Is this because when they take the money and they're transferring it, they're moving it around, and now it's sitting in banks? When banks have money, if they have your money, even if it's just for a few weeks, they have the opportunity to use that money to make more money. Are they doing that?
It certainly doesn't. It doesn't hurt to keep it a bit longer. They're doing it primarily because the system has a series of intermediaries, and each of those intermediaries represent a risk. If one of those intermediaries says, I have the money for Mr. Antonopoulos' wire, and you give that money to Antonopoulos, but the intermediary doesn't give it to you, you're out of money, right? So there's risk. With every intermediary you put in, there's risk, and that's called counterparty risk. Because of the way the banking system is, with perhaps 5, 6, 7 intermediaries in a single transfer, that creates a lot of cumulative risk, and they protect with that risk by slowing things down. And that risk doesn't exist in Bitcoin because it's from one party directly to another, no counterparties. That's one of the core principles. The funny thing, I had this conversation with my bank. I said I had done this conference in Germany, Frankfurt, at the headquarters of the Bundesbank. Now, for those of your viewers or listeners who don't know, the Bundesbank is the federal bank of Germany. And they probably consider the United States Federal Reserve to be a mediocre creditor compared to the Bundesbank. This is like the best credit rating on the planet, right? And I'm going to speak at a conference there, and they're paying me for my expenses. They send a wire transfer, and I call my bank, and after 4 weeks, they finally find it and tell me, we've received your bank wire transfer. We're going to hold it because of the risk profile. I'm like, I don't understand. Well, you haven't been paid by this particular payer before, so we're going to put a hold on it. I said, you do know this is the Bundesbank, right? You are holding, and they held it for 2 weeks. You are holding for 2 weeks because of the credit risk of the Federal Bank of Germany, the most creditworthy institution. I'm not trying to receive money from Somalia. You know, this isn't even something weird. And if even they can't pay me in the age of the internet instantaneously, there is something wrong with this banking system. And there is. Because I got paid for the Bitcoin conference I was doing in the same town instantaneously. Bitcoin is internet money.
Okay, and to sum up, to finish this video, to close it with a bang, is I think it's best to give what a lot of Bitcoiners believe is the best 5-minute summary of Bitcoin ever given. It was given inside of the US government, I think in front of the senators. And yeah, I'll just play it for you. So it's going to talk about how Bitcoin is for everyone, how Bitcoin is a digital public infrastructure, right? So that's important. Just like the internet, it's almost nowadays in 2024, 2025, it's really considered internet as like a basic human right, almost like explanation of Bitcoin ever given. And this was a Bitcoin advocate that got in front of the US Congress, I believe it is, and he is explaining Bitcoin. So I just want to go through and show you that just to finish off this video.
Networks. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the world's first cryptocurrency, and it works because of the world's first public blockchain network. What does Bitcoin do? It's simple. It lets you send and receive value to and from anyone in the world using nothing more than a computer and an internet connection. Now, why is it revolutionary? Because unlike every other tool for sending money over the internet, it works without the need to trust a middleman. The lack of any corporation in between means that Bitcoin is the world's first public digital payments infrastructure. And by public, I simply mean available to all and not owned by any single entity. Now, we have public infrastructure for information, for websites, for email. It's called the internet. But the only public payments infrastructure that we have is cash, as in paper money. And it only works in face-to-face transactions. Before Bitcoin, if you wanted to pay someone remotely over the phone or the internet, then you could not use public infrastructure. You would rely on a private bank to open their books and add a ledger entry that debits you and credits the person you're paying. And if you both don't use the same bank, well, then there'll be multiple banks and multiple ledger entries in between. With Bitcoin, the ledger is the public blockchain, and anyone can add an entry to that ledger, transferring their Bitcoins to someone else. And anyone, regardless of their nationality, race, religion, gender, sex, or creditworthiness, can for absolutely no cost create a Bitcoin address in order to receive payments digitally. Bitcoin is the world's first globally accessible public money. Is it perfect? No. Neither was email when it was invented in 1972. Bitcoin's not the best money on every margin. It's not yet accepted everywhere. It's not used often to quote prices, and it's not always a stable store of value. but it is working. And the mere fact that it works without trusted intermediaries is amazing. It's a computer science breakthrough, and it will be as significant for freedom, prosperity, and human flourishing as the birth of the internet. And Bitcoin is just the beginning. If we can replace private payments infrastructure, then we can replace other private choke points to human interaction as well. Now, why should we want to build more public infrastructure? Why should we embrace blockchains over corporate intermediaries? Why should we tolerate their inefficiencies and work to make them better? Why should we want the pioneers of this technology here in the United States and not fleeing overseas? A simple reason: because the corporate intermediaries providing today's critical but privately owned infrastructure are becoming fewer, larger, and more powerful, and their failures are increasingly grave. So roughly half of all Americans, 143 million people, had their Social Security numbers exposed to hackers because of a breach at Equifax. The SWIFT network has relayed hundreds of millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions because of hacked member banks in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Ecuador, and Russia. The FBI suspects now that the largest of these hacks was perpetrated by North Korea. Corrupt, low-level employees at an Indian bank, Punjab National, were able to fraudulently certify SWIFT messages, stealing $1.8 billion. It's the largest electronic bank robbery in history. In fact, it's the largest bank robbery in history. In October 2016, an estimated 1.2 million internet-connected devices were hacked and turned into a botnet that for several hours made prominent websites unavailable across Europe and North America, including CNN and Fox News, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Increasingly, physical machines are being connected to the internet to augment their capabilities. They're wired through servers that are owned and maintained by private and trusted intermediaries, the so-called Internet of Things. Pacemakers from St. Jude's Hospital have been hacked. Baby monitors from TrendNet have been hacked. And Jeeps from Jeep have been hacked to the point where they can be remotely commandeered and driven off the road. Now, those vulnerabilities are inescapable in systems that have single points of failure. It doesn't matter if the point of failure is a corporation or if it's a government. There shouldn't be a single point of failure. Similar choke points existed before the internet. If you wanted to deliver a message, you'd have to go through one of 3 television broadcasters or a handful of newspapers. Private corporations are essential, but no critical infrastructure should rely on 1 or 2. The internet removed single points of failure in communications infrastructure and ushered in a wave of competition among new media corporations building on top of its public rails. Blockchains can similarly disintermediate critical payments and IoT infrastructure. The technology is not yet ready to answer all of those questions today, but it is our best hope. And as with the internet in the 1990s, we need a light-touch, pro-innovation policy to ensure that these innovations flourish in America for the benefit and security of all Americans.
In the Bitcoin school, we learned to trade. Digital coins, man, we getting paid. Crypto world, it ain't no charade. Navigating blocks like a digital arcade. Peer-to-peer is how we roll. Code it up, we in control. Crypto wallet makes us whole. Stacked in Satoshis, that's the goal. Bitcoin school, we staying cool.